Data security, top of everybody's mind. Meg Whitman pointed out that at the Business Roundtable event she was at in Chicago, we spent 8 hours talking about it with other CEOs. And I think that we have people in here whose there are enough drive-bys each day, rattling their doors, in the thousands, hundreds of thousands for some of the financial institutions daily. So if you would, give us a lay of the land. How is this evolving? What part of it is still kind of the mischievous hacker in his or her garage? What part of it's crime? What part of it's state organizations? What part of it is Chinese companies trying to make their quarterly revenue numbers? Give us a sense of how this plays out.
Well, you talk about lay of the land, and I come from the world of the fiscal cliff, so I'm trying to decide how should I describe the topography. I wouldn't say it's a cliff. I would say it's a steep downward slope. Not so much because we're not doing some things, but because the adversary is picking up the pace. Broadly speaking, there are 4 kinds of things we worry about. One, which I think most people are familiar with, is cybercrime, fraud, things of that sort, identity impersonation. And while the scale of that in the cyber arena is greater than we see in the physical arena, in many ways it's a variation on the thing we've dealt with since time immemorial. But there are 3 other areas which I think are relatively new. One has to do with intellectual property theft. As you point out, there are nation states that view their intelligence agencies and networks as extensions of their commercial establishments. We don't do that in the United States, and countries like England don't do that, but other countries do that. And it's been estimated that billions of dollars of intellectual property are flowing out of the United States into other countries based on theft, much of it occurring using cyber means, some of it being physical means.
So we had a poll, I'm sorry to interrupt, just before you got here, where 15% of the CIOs in this room said that if they'd been hacked, that they had determined that intellectual property had been stolen. 15%, the other 85% said no, but it was rightly pointed out they don't really know.
Well, that's right. People often say there are 2 types of enterprises, those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. Yeah. So I would venture to guess the proportion that have actually lost something is actually higher than 15% by a considerable margin. 2 other things have become maybe more recent developments in the last couple of years. One is cyber hacktivism, or politically motivated cyber activity, not to be confused with the harmless Matthew Broderick of the movies. And here we see what is sometimes called doxing, the effort to penetrate and steal embarrassing corporate or personal information in order to put it out on the internet to embarrass people. And by the way, this is not just at the office. Senior corporate executives and board members have to be concerned even about their home computers and what data they might have at home that might be hacked and then ultimately disseminated. Finally, and I think maybe of greatest concern, is the problem of actual interference with our networks and our physical world. So many of you know that's been widely reported, including by the Journal, that a number of US banks over a period of the last few months have been serially attacked with rather aggressive denial of service attacks, which overwhelm the networks. And they've managed to deal with these attacks, but they're apparently more intense and greater scale than we often see in the past. We also have a greater concern now with those physical systems that are controlled by digital means, industrial control systems or SCADA systems, whether they be power, water, other utilities, things of that sort. Leon Panetta, the defense secretary, in a speech last year, revealed that in Saudi Arabia, Aramco, the oil company, had been the subject of a significant attack that destroyed 30,000 computers. It was a similar attack on a natural gas company in Qatar. And there was a report issued yesterday, or rather last week, by the Department of Homeland Security that estimated that last year there were almost 200 serious attacks on SCADA and control systems in the United States, most of them involving energy, and then second came water and utilities. Yeah. Right. And what happens is what we see in the evidence is that people have entered, they've scoped out, or they've done reconnaissance in the system. Sometimes they may have left a tool in the system. And the reason that they do that, we have to be concerned about, is that they're looking for vulnerabilities they could exploit to actually attack or take down our electricity, our water, our transportation, or anything that relies on industrial control systems. What's been interesting about this last report that came out of DHS is it revealed the significant number of systems that are actually connected to the internet. And we often teach people that these ought to be standalone. But in fact, in many cases, they can be connected to the internet. I'll tell you one story, I won't name the enterprise, of an enterprise that had a significant theft of intellectual property. When they looked to see how that had occurred, they discovered that there was a remote connection to a thermostat in an outbuilding. And that remote connection turned out to be the vulnerable node through which the adversary entered into the network and was able to get the intellectual property. Fast forward, we're talking about a smart grid. Imagine now we are hooking up millions of nodes to an electric grid that's all going to be computerized, digitized, and on a network. And imagine what that means in terms of ability to capture information, as well as to potentially interfere with or disable some of our critical systems.
A lot of entry points, potentially.